Lessons from Hurricane Helene. Hello, YouTube. I wanted to do a little bit of an after-action report on our experience getting a direct hit from Hurricane Helene, basically. So we live in the Florida Panhandle, outside of the Tallahassee area on the Florida-Georgia border. So we just experienced a direct hit. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about that experience and a couple, maybe 2 or 3 key takeaways or lessons learned from this hurricane, being that it was basically my first time getting hit by a hurricane. So there's some things that you don't expect when you're kind of mentally preparing for it. And I want to talk a little bit about that as I basically clean up. It's Sunday. We were hit by Hurricane Helene, I believe it was Thursday night. So we're just now getting to the point where we're getting the property cleaned up from all of the deadfall and debris and fallen limbs and branches. So this is the fire that's been fed all day just from Hurricane Helene debris. You can see my little transport system there, my Coleman BT200X. I did a video about that a couple years ago. It's still the same bike, still running pretty good. And of course the jet sled as my little transport for hauling the debris and stuff around. So as I continue to feed this fire, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about that experience and some of the key takeaways. So first, the build-up to the storm was a little excruciating because they kept on pushing back the time it was going to hit. It was initially supposed to hit at 7 p.m. and then as the time approached, or the storm approached, they kept on pushing back that time, hour by hour by hour, to the point where the storm actually hit around 11 p.m. at night. And the first thing that I didn't expect in the run-up to the storm was to be hit by the storm at night. It's just not one of the things I had considered. And all the kind of mental exercise when I had thought about being in a hurricane, I always just assumed I'd get hit in the middle of the day. Well, not so much. 11 o'clock, the hurricane hit. I remember I was laying on the ground watching a movie, on some like sheets and stuff, kind of like a little made up fort in the living room, hurricane fort, if you will. And the power went out like clockwork as soon as the storm basically hit the Panhandle, hit the Gulf Coast. And we were without power for a couple of days. It was a little dicey there for a while, a little scary with the high winds, the house. Of course, with the power out, all you hear is the storm with no electronics or anything going. And its effects on the house were quite great. We could actually feel the house vibrate. Now, luckily for me, I actually was so tired, I passed out. But apparently, other folks in the house were a little worried into the night, but we managed to pull through with no property damage, no house damage, and of course, no injury, which is a blessing. That wasn't the case for everybody, of course. There was some unfortunate loss of life and a lot of damage. Now, some family friends had it a little bit harder off. One group that we know of had a tree fall on their house. A few people we know had tree fall on their power line, so they're still without power to this day. Hopefully they'll get it back on soon. Unfortunately, it did eventually come on for us. But overall, it was we didn't see much other than a bunch of the trees basically going sideways, which was a little nerve-wracking. But for the most part, we came out okay. Now, I want to talk about some of the takeaways, because in our preps, we run 2 generators. I think probably the best setup possible, the optimal setup, would be a whole house generator. That would be a dedicated, hardwired generator setup to basically feed your whole house that you can set on in the event of power loss and then basically live a normal life. Well, we don't have that, but we have probably which would be the second most desirable situation, which is 2 generators. So we have the Champion that we talked about in the past, which we had some issues with. I thought it was kind of funny because right after the storm hit, my troubleshooting Champion generator video started getting hit. So I'm willing to bet that a few other people went to go start up their generators and they were in op, which is part of the lessons, but we'll get to that now. The first lesson is do not procrastinate. The moment you hear the storm is coming, get your stuff in order. Get your gas tanks filled up, get your sandbags, make sure your generator and all your stuff is working. I probably didn't wait as long as some people, which was the last moment when they needed it. I did actually check my generators before the storm hit, but I wasn't able to get parts in time before the storm hit, and I was down one generator when the storm hit. Now, our setup is basically we have a Cat RP 6500, which feeds the well pump, which, you know, takes some significant power. And then we have the Champion, which we run outside the garage, which powers the fridges and freezers and a couple comfort items such as lights, right? Charging stations for phones. Well, the Champion never got running. So unfortunately, we had to deal with that. But we did have one generator, which was the Cat RP 6500. And we were eventually able to use that for not only the well pump, but also to power the fridge, the freezers, and some lights. So we stretched a little bit further than we thought it'd go, which is good to know. But lesson being, make sure your stuff is good to go the minute you know there's a storm coming. Do not procrastinate. The second lesson I learned is that you really want to learn your engineering and get your engineering out of the way before the water starts. What happened for me is we went and got a whole bunch of sandbags. I put the sandbags in a particular place where I thought I wanted them to prevent the garage flooding. And I decided I didn't like where they were, and I re-engineered it after it started raining. Well, apparently sandbags, especially these sandbags, once they're wet and you try to move them, they leak out a whole bunch of this like muddy water. So in the attempt to try to prevent the garage from getting water in it, I caused water to get into it by moving the sandbags after they were wet. I think it ended up doing the job that it needed to do after the fact, but don't move the sandbags once they're already wet. They're heavier too. Those were the biggest takeaways. And number 3, if you're in an area where they say to evacuate, evacuate. I know there were some people that were stubborn and held out, especially people in like mobile homes and stuff. Unfortunately, some of those people got hurt and, you know, in some cases worse. So if you're caused to evacuate, evacuate. And you should probably be paying attention. I'm not a big news junkie these days. I don't really like stay so tuned to the world, if you will. But it's good to at least know what the news is for events like this. I remember 2 days before the storm hit, they were predicting it was going to be a big storm. And I was at the gym, and I remember some of the gym goers were like talking with the janitor, and the janitor's like, "Oh, is there a bad storm coming?" Like he didn't even know, which was crazy to me. So I think in order to stay prepared, you have to have a certain degree of know current events in order to stay prepared. Just a couple takeaways that I took from our experience with Hurricane Helene. And we got another one coming.